Hey, and welcome to our first podcast, 15 Minutes with Andy. For those of you that are tuning into this, first of all, thank you so much. We appreciate you spending some time with us. The genesis of this idea came to first start a podcast, but how do you want to do it? There's so many podcasts that are out in the world, and what ground do you want to cover? And my way of thinking in developing this was there is a lot of negativity in our world, and then you couple that with a lot of stories right here in our own backyard, and we've heard the old adage of having 15 minutes of fame. We think that there are a lot of people who feel like they are quote-unquote ordinary people who are doing or have done some pretty extraordinary things, and they're right here in our backyard. So the premise is we want to kind of shine a light on them and give them 15 minutes of fame. So it's 15 minutes with Andy, not necessarily a 15-minute podcast. So we're a work in progress. We hope you spread the word and let some people know about the stories that we're going to tell. And we think we have a lot of really good ones, including our kickoff one here today. We are glad to be joined by the executive director of Sarah's Friends, and that is Katie Shaffer. I always have to check myself on that. I knew you as Katie Kramer for so long, and Katie Shaffer. Katie, thanks for being with us and being the first person on our 15-minute segment here, our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
To be the first.
You'll
set the bar a little low, I think I'm going to do.
I wouldn't say that at all, and I think a lot of people listening would disagree with what you just said as well, and are going to find out a great story. You personally, Sarah's Friends is an organization, and I think when I said shine a light on some real true heroes / survivors that have lived through some very difficult situations.
Yeah.
So first things first, I'll let you introduce yourself, maybe tell our listeners to this podcast your background, and I guess where you started, and then we'll kind of guide you where you're at right now.
Okay. So I'm Katie Shaffer. I am born and raised in Bryan, Ohio. I did move away for a few years and came back, just excited to be back. I love this town. Not many people say that, at least not my generation, but I just do love it. I have a background in business. Business was always my passion. I grew up wanting to be an entrepreneur of something, changed many times throughout my childhood. Went to college in Northwest State for business. And it kind of took a couple different career choices, mainly just, young 20s, just trying to figure out what it is I really wanted to do. I was a wedding planner for many years in my early 20s and eventually ended up getting a job at Sarah's Friends as their office manager. That's why I took the job. That was what the position was and why I was excited to do it. I was very blessed enough in my life to never, even though I've born and raised here, never knew what Sarah's house at the time was. Never really paid attention to downtown Bryan and saw it. Didn't really even know when I took put my resume in for the job. I didn't even really know what it was. I had to look up their website and see what is this organization. So I would be lying if I said I was interested in the advocacy work or really the mission. I mean, I'm a people person, so of course I care, but I just wanted to do the business side until I met the clients. That changed, I think, week 2. I was never trained to be an advocate. I was never really supposed to work real hands-on with the clients. Of course, I had to understand what we did because I did the payables and things like that. But, with being such a small office, we've always had 2 people in the office. So there's overlap with clients. And there was about 2 weeks in, I had to just kind of sit with a client while they were waiting to talk to the executive director who was already with someone else. And in just talking with this person, I'll never forget her face. I'll never forget what she said to me, how hard it was for me not to just lose myself and bawl as she was talking to me. And I'm getting emotional now even thinking about it because I haven't thought about her actually in a long time. And it immediately changed my life and made me realize how blessed I was as a person to never have had to go through that. How things happen in our town because I was very naive and very sheltered, and just to see the strength in her, even though she thought of herself as a weak person because of going through that and being put in that position. it will forever have changed my life. And every client adds to that. So I found a passion in working with the clients that we serve. I've been there 7 years now, and I truly mean it when I say I think I will retire at this job, as long as everyone will keep me.
I think we're safe there.
Yeah.
As long as you want to keep doing it. So this was kind of a typical story of you never know where life is going to take you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer in fate, and it was a God thing that led me to that job. It really was. I mean, it changed my life so much, but the ability, and I always say this, I'm 31 now, and I've had the ability to find a career choice that, yes, it provides income for my family and things like that, but I feel like I volunteer every day. I look forward to going to work every single day, and I truly feel like it's volunteering. It fills my soul in that kind of a way that I never feel like, oh, I don't want to go to my job. It's not a job to me. It's a true life passion now. And I never would have found that on my own. I mean, I had to get kind of guided by something in the universe to that. And I thank God every day it did.
So from office assistant to the director's position, how did that happen?
So I was there for not quite a year when the executive director resigned. And then I was the only other staff member. So it was kind of, everybody looked at me as, well, what are you going to do? And it took 6 months of me being just the interim director and me kind of kicking and screaming. I did not want the job. I did not want the job. I felt I was such a fish out of water. I was 25 at the time. That's a lot for somebody that I look back and I think I'm just a baby then, I was new to nonprofit. I was new to the job still because it was a year in. And the title scared me to death. I mean, I've had more conversations with each board member at the time of it, like, why don't you just take the job? You're doing the work already. And I don't want the title. It gave me such anxiety and pressure. And I felt like I was going to fail the community, and it was so hard. And I kind of took it finally kicking and screaming of just, well, there's no one else. I mean, who else is going to do it? No one's here. I'm so glad I did because I feel like I get to dabble now in everything that I love. I get to still do all the business stuff that I still love, but it's fueled by such a new passion of working with the survivors and always thinking forward of how to make it better for them, how to get more programs that benefit them and help them in their journey. Which is exciting because it'll never get old. It'll never get there's no glass ceiling. It's sky's the limit. And I thrive in an environment like that. So to me, it'll never feel redundant. There's always more and more and more that we can keep doing.
So for those that are listening that don't know anything about Sarah's Friends, or maybe know a little bit, you mentioned it already. Sarah's House was the beginning 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Sarah's Friends now. What is Sarah's Friends? When you give a presentation or you're telling a stranger, what you do for a living, kind of tell us how do you describe Sarah's Friends?
It's like my 5-minute elevator pitch, right?
Yes.
Or 30-second or whatever it's supposed to be. So Sarah's Friends is a nonprofit organization in Williams County that assists crime victims here in our county. In the past, we were founded in 91, and we were called Sarah's House, and we were literally a house by the hospital that allowed child victims of crime to come and be interviewed by law enforcement, job and family services, and whoever needed to be a part of that investigation one time. They had obviously the two-way mirrors and all the recording audio and things so that a child only had to share that horrible story once. And they weren't having to continue to be re-victimized by continuing to share it. That changed in the late 90s. I think just state laws changed, and who was doing those interviews kind of just made a shift. And so our home was no longer needed to house those interviews. So at that time, we had a house, we had this nonprofit set up, but what is our mission going to be? And so it merged into helping domestic violence victims, which then later in later early 2000s merged into helping all crime victims, because we still help, I would say 85% domestic violence, but we will help any crime victim because they're all equally as traumatic. They might not need as many resources as a domestic violence survivor, but someone who's a victim of theft or sexual abuse or elder abuse or arson, I mean, that is trauma, and trauma is the same. It's not bigger if you've had this experience compared to this. Trauma is trauma. And we're happy to provide the services to anyone who's been traumatized or victimized by a crime in Williams County.
And hear me as I say this loud and clear, and you as you answer this loud and clear. It is here in Williams County, in full force. It exists.
Yes.
And I know that is, if there's a pet peeve about the job or maybe how people think about Sarah's friends or the the area statistics or whatever, that would probably be the biggest, would it not?
Yes. I've been doing this 7 years, and again, our community is small. And there are people that know what I do for a living, and I, of course, walk around people who have no idea who I am, and that is perfectly fine with me. And so I hear chatter. I hear people having conversations about victimizations, domestic violence, whatever it may be, especially when celebrity things come up in the news. I feel like that's when the gossip train starts. And I hear comments like that. I hear, oh, I'm so thankful we live in this little rural area that doesn't happen here. Or if they do know of somebody, well, how could they stay? How could they put up with this? How could they? And it takes everything I have to not just really say what I want to say. And I have to always.
Here's your forum.
I always have to kind of take a step back and be very professional and because people don't know. I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I always have to remember that. People only know what they've been taught or what they've had to do life lessons and learn. So it's kind of unintentional ignorance, if you will. So that being said, it happens here. I will tell you, in 7 years I have been there, I have heard of stories that I thought only existed on Law & Order episodes, and it happens here. It happens to people in high-paying jobs, in very respectable jobs. It happens to people that you would probably look at as maybe your boss, your CEO, your teacher, your doctor, that you would never in a million years think, oh, that person would be suffering in that way at home. You would never think that. And unfortunately, those are the people that don't really like to reach out either, because it's hard. And there's a lot of guilt that goes with being a victim of violence or just of a crime in general. And a lot of shame that comes with that shouldn't be on any victim, which I maybe will get to that later in the podcast. But people need to realize it can happen to literally anyone. Men, women, adult, elder, child. It does not matter what your walk of life is. It doesn't matter how you carry yourself in this world. Even, I've explained to even you before, me in this job and having the training I have does not negate me from being a victim of violence down the road. I could still be a victim of sexual assault. I could still be a victim of theft. I could still be a victim of domestic violence if my husband all of a sudden turns out to be somebody that I didn't think he was. They're very good at that, so I'm not naive to that. I'm just very blessed that it hasn't happened to me yet. And I will always say yet, because you just never know.
And I think that's, Katie, it's fair to say a stigma that we have, or at least the separating fact and fiction about that it can happen at any point in time. And you hear people say, well, why does she stay there, or keep the children there, or he? I mean, we don't want to say that males aren't victims of abuse either, or violent situations, but why do they stay? Talk about that.
I think the biggest thing that people have to always stop and really put yourself in that person's shoes. And I'll use her just to make it easier for me so I don't have to flip-flop back and forth. But yes, males are victims just as frequent as women, and even in Williams County. But say there is a domestic violence situation and there are children involved. Our court system, love them or hate them, is set up to keep the kids with both parents unless they can show really, really good concrete evidence that abusive parent has been abusive to the children specifically. And I'm not talking having the kids being around that, even though that is just as traumatic. I'm talking like specifically harming physically those kids. That doesn't happen a lot because guess what? Victim parent steps in between and takes the brunt of it. So they don't have those reports. They don't have that evidence. And so to sit there and expect a victim parent to uproot her kids knowing now that the courts are going to give probably half the time to abusive parent with no protections, I think everybody who's a parent can probably take a breath and realize, well, yeah, that would be a very hard decision to make, right? I mean, how many of us could just throw our kids to the lion? And that's a very real thing. And until the court system changes, and that's statewide, that's not here, that's not local, that's statewide, maybe even federal. And I think until that changes, there's going to be a lot of people that will never leave until their kids are grown. Not because they don't want to, not because their life isn't at risk every single day, but because they're looking out for their kids. And that's most parents, right? So that's a big obstacle. Probably one we see more often than anything else. And then you have the financial aspect. You have housing. You know, abusers are very, very good at slowly but surely controlling every little aspect of a victim's life, taking away every good resource that they have, and basically being the end-all be-all to that person. So you're now throwing somebody into a dark tunnel and just good luck and hoping they survive. And there's too many obstacles. You know, how am I going to get a job? Where am I going to live? How am I going to afford that place? How am I going to have transportation? How am I going to have just general support? Who's going to believe me, first off? And am I going to be safe? What's the retaliation if I leave? Am I going to, have him come to this house? Am I going to have, more of a lethality problem with, gun violence and everything the way it is? It's crazy. And I think people just need to take a step back and really put themselves in a victim's shoes and say, if that was your life, how easy would it be for you to walk out the door? You may want to. You may want to every second of the day, every single day. But if you don't have all those resources lined up to know that you're going to be safe and that you're going to be able to do that, sometimes that's more scary than dealing with what at least you know now how to deal with. It's not great, and it's still just as scary, but it's knowingly scary, And I just think people need to just always remember that. And it's so easy to judge, but we need to stop judging.
Yeah.
We need to really stop.
And I want to get into that. I just want to remind everybody we're listening to Katie Shaffer, who's the director of the Sarah's Friends here in Williams County, and our first guest on 15 Minutes with Andy, our podcast that's just getting started now. And I want to get back to that because you mentioned it earlier. Mm-hmm. And it is a societal problem that we do, and it's an embarrassing one that we do, and that is victim shaming. And that it's shameful that we as a society, not everybody, but we're guilty of it.
Right.
Why does it? And I'm sure it drives you crazy as well. It drives you beyond maybe anger sometimes, and it hurts. And talk a little bit about that. What does that look like? How do we get better? How do we get away from it, Katie?
And I want to first say, again, before I had this job, I was one of those people. So, I mean, it just happens. It's that naiveness, it's that lack of knowledge, it's that lack of understanding that happens to anyone unless they're kind of forced to change. So I don't want to put anyone down or, sit there and act like I'm on such a pedestal. But it does need to change. And I think it came out a lot with, like, the Me Too movement, with not victim shaming and not saying, well, if somebody's dressed like that, they deserve that. Or if they were promiscuous, look what they get themselves into. No, none of that makes somebody deserving of being victimized, of having consent taken away, of being treated like they're less than. And I think it's just a knowledge thing. So hopefully people listening will just hear this and really understand that here in our county, just stop being judgmental. And really, if you hear somebody suffering, be a human being. Just pause before you say something and really say, well, if that happened to me, how would I feel? What would I need to get out? And hopefully that'll encourage people to not only be more understanding and more kind, but also maybe even partner with Sarah's Friends or another nonprofit that assists in the community and help. Because we're all people. We need to help each other. I think this last year has been a huge testament to that we all are suffering in different ways. And I think the more that we can all just kind of put down our own swords and our own judgment and our own fingers that we point at each other and just learn to really lift each other up and realize that, you know what, even if you don't understand, work to understand, because that's just part of being human nature, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Where are we, I'm going to go back to when you started as director. Mm-hmm. Where are we at? Are we better or are we worse from then to then? And then where do we want to go? Where do we need to be as a society? I'll get specific with Sarah's Friends on the future in a minute, but where are we now from then, and where do we need to be?
I think it's hard to answer that question because there's a difference between, even like our numbers. We also have really worked hard to be more aware to those in the community. So our numbers are going up, but it's not necessarily because crime victimization rates are up. It's more so because the awareness of that we can help is there. In general, just from a national standpoint and even a state standpoint, since 2018, I know for a fact that victimization rates have gone up. Gun violence rates are through the roof this last year. Fatalities from gun violence are through the roof. And we have had that in Williams County. We have had murders in Williams County. And it is the most tragic type of crime to deal with because everybody is so judgmental with those cases. Like more so, I think, than any case I've ever worked with and heard just that chatter from the community. Because again, it's always, well, were they involved in this and were they involved in that? And wanting to put down people. I can't believe sometimes what people say. And I always have to, like I said, bite my tongue and say, okay, I need to educate. I need to not accuse and not be mad. I need to educate. But yeah, in general, it's going up. And I think stress adds to that. COVID certainly made it worse because everyone is stressed out and they're stuck together. And so domestic violence shot through the roof. And we are just now still starting to get the trickling effects of that here in our county because people couldn't reach out safely for help during that time. Usually their abusers are at work and things and they were able to sneak phone calls to us or emails or whatever it may be. Well, that was gone for an entire year while things were getting even more severe at home. So the services and the needs that they have are even higher and more severe. And they have to feel safe in order to do that. And so we're still just starting to get that trickling effect. I wish so badly that we could live in a world where I could say, I hope in 10 years we have no crime and I can work myself right out of a job and it's not needed. That will never be the case. And I hate saying that because I'm a very glass half full person, but I'm not that naive anymore. I know that it's human nature. We can all have those decisions to do good or bad. And unfortunately, people make those bad decisions on a daily basis. And while that's happening, we have victims in kind of the crosshairs, and they'll always need those services. So my goal now is just whatever a survivor comes to us as an obstacle, I want to be able to match it with the solution. That's my biggest passion. I will never really rest, so to speak, until I can see that. And that's always going to change, which again is the exciting factor for me that I'll never get bored with the job. But it's also exhausting to know that, man, this is never going to get easier. And survivors are always going to have obstacles and they're always going to have things that make it hard for them to leave. And then on the flip side, again, putting yourself in their shoes, knowing how hard that is to go through life.
And a success story for a survivor, it's not the same for everybody. Talk about, I've always found that to be, because we always want the Hollywood ending, and that person has gotten away and they are flying high and thriving, and then cue the music.
Right.
And there are some examples of that, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But success looks different for everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah. I've always said abusers are cookie cutter. Victims are not. So the nice part about our program that I love and that I can stand behind till the end is that we are not a cookie cutter program. So yes, our services are standard. We have these types of services and this is how we help. But it's up to each individual that comes to utilize those services on what they want to utilize, how they want to utilize those services, because it's their life. And at the same time, we also will support you if you choose to stay. Because guess what? You need support with that. And we probably understand after talking to you why you're choosing to stay. And again, it's a choice to stay because of everything else that's an obstacle that they just are not safe enough to get out of yet. And so to be able to provide such a flexible program where we can meet survivors where they are and help them kind of navigate what their own personal goals are and help just handhold them through that process, whatever that process looks like, then to us, that is them surviving. That is them healing. We don't get to ever say, yep, you've now reached the point of you're healed, or you've reached the point of being a survivor and not a victim. That's up to them to decide. And that's, again, a nice part about our program. It's open-ended as far as time. We can have somebody work with us for 5 years. if that's what they want, if they need that support for that long or whatever it may be. And sometimes they only need one service from us and they're done with us, and that is fine. That's up to them, because, I mean, you and I, we would never want somebody to dictate our life, right? And tell us that you have to do this and you have to do that, or, oh, nope, time's up, you're on your own, you know. So to be able to just allow them to make those decisions and give that back to them, I think that's the nicest thing that we can do too, is give their voice back to them, give all of the options back to them, and have them be able to finally stand up for themselves and say, no, I've had these things taken from me, but not anymore, and I get to make these choices for myself and my family. That's huge. And that leads to them surviving in whatever capacity that looks like for them.
Katie, what is in your mind right now, what does Sarah's Friends look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, down the road? What's the future of the organization? How does the organization get better and more improved? How does that look to you?
I hope funding is stable enough to grow. I hope that we can finally grow out of just having a staff of 2 to a staff of 4 or 5, because we really need that. I hope that outreach continues to reach into the more rural areas of Williams County. We're very Bryan heavy because we're located in Bryan, and transportation is an issue. And I think, again, just because we're physically located there and people see us more, a lot of our clientele come from Bryan, but we need to get more into, Montpelier, Eden, Pioneer, all of those more rural areas in the county. That takes money and time and effort to do that. Plus, we have to be able to have the support for the increase of survivors that we're going to be getting if we really are tapping into and focusing on those areas. And again, sky's the limit. I want to grow everything. I want to grow every single program that we have to not only just meet the needs, but to just be better, to be more well-rounded. Again, every single obstacle a client comes into me and says that this is, what I'm needing in order to feel secure moving forward, I want to be able to provide that, whether it's directly or through referral, because I'm a huge believer in that too. I don't like duplicating services. We have so many good nonprofits in Williams County and other agencies in Williams County that as long as we can just do a good referral process so that way it's seamless for the client, that's great. I don't need to, add a service to us just to keep it in-house. I think that's silly. And I would rather use people for the skills that they have and just, again, make it seamless for a client so they're not falling through a gap while that referral process is happening.
You're doing the podcast with me, but you mentioned an office of 2. So I'll let you maybe introduce verbally to our listeners who else is in the office and what an incredible job she does as well.
Yes. So Rachel Blanton is her name. She has been with us since early 2018, and she was a godsend to us as well. Again, that's a fate thing, I strongly believe. She's our program manager and our outreach coordinator. So normally if you call, she's going to be the one that you talk to first. She's our lead advocate. She's also the one that does a fantastic job in all of our outreach events, and she's so creative. That we are very much different. I am very type A for anyone who doesn't know anything about me. Very, some would say boring, some would say very structured, which I'm fine with all of those labels. And she is very out of the box creative. And so we're very much a yin and yang, and we balance each other out very well. And her creativity has just changed so much. And her energy, her spirit, she is an amazing advocate. Clients really respond well with her, and I think our office is better for sure with her being in there. And I can't imagine going back to being by myself or really having another type of personality in there. Granted, like I said, I do want to grow more people, so it'll be a nice compliment. But she's my right hand for sure.
If anybody that's listening to this podcast is a victim or knows a victim, or somebody knows that they know is a victim, how that process works, what would you advise them to do, generally speaking, specifically with Sarah's Friends?
Well, first, if it's a victim that's listening, it doesn't matter what their victimization was. They need to let go of the guilt and the shame. They need to hear in my voice very strongly, you did not deserve this. It is not your fault. And you don't need any of that negative feeling that comes with that. You need to relinquish that to your abuser and know that there is help available and that please call us. if it's someone who knows a victim, again, maybe don't. Again, people try to help so much, and sometimes they just help wrong because they just don't know. Again, I was one of those people. So just listen. I think don't try to fix, don't try to offer guidance if you don't feel really confident in what you're saying. But listening is the biggest thing that you can do, because they just need to know that they're being heard and that they're being believed, and that all you have to say is there's help available. I will go with you to Sarah's Friends, or we can call Sarah's Friends together. Know that you can also call on behalf of somebody and just get information to pass along if that client or that victim is not ready to do that on their own. We will give you just general information all day long because we just want to help. So just somebody should just make contact with Sarah's Friends, because I think there, again, it's a wealth of knowledge that we have. We have a lot of training. We have to go through a lot of training to make sure that we're knowledgeable and educated on how to properly, because there is a way to properly help somebody who's been a victim and to potentially harm even more. And that's always unintentional, but you can re-victimize a victim very easily. So just reach out to us and allow us to guide you either way, whether you're somebody supporting a victim or you are a victim.
No, I mean, I knew this. I've gotten to know you through the years, and don't take this, I hope you take this in the spirit of how I'm saying it. The business world's loss is our gain. There's no doubt in my mind. I knew it before we did this podcast, but now that we've sat down and heard you be your voice and then be the victims' voices and survivors' voice, I don't want to, not just victims, survivors' voices, then the business world loss is our gain, and you have found you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
yeah.
In my mind, here's what I'm going to say. You're an entrepreneur for Williams County of hope, of love, of giving, of compassion. And I'm saying this on behalf of people that have never used Sarah's Friends or may never use Sarah's Friends, or some that have. You are very much a jewel in Williams County. There's a reason I picked you to do this.
I appreciate that. I feel, and I said this, we were actually a very fortunate recipient of the Northwest State awards that they have back in 2017, the Make a Difference Award. And that was the highest honor that we could have received. And I did it on behalf of our clients, because I don't feel like, and I hope my board does not get mad at me for saying this, but I don't feel like we do something so special. Like, do I love that we can provide services? Absolutely. Do I love that we have compassionate staff that's ready and willing to help people in our community? 100%. But in order for a victim to become a survivor, that is on them. We don't do the work for them. They do that hard work. We just get to lead them through that, hold their hand through that process, and watch that beautiful journey. And so I feel bad sometimes in kind of taking a lot of that good compliments and things, because I feel like I'm just being a human being. And I'm blessed to be able to do that for my job, because otherwise I would be trying to find a way to do this for volunteer hours and things, but everybody gets so busy, So I'm very, very blessed to be able to do it full time. And it is the clients that do the work. They don't choose to be victims, but they do choose to be survivors. And that is a hard journey to go through. People think that would be easy because it's the better. It is hard. It is the hardest thing. And I have watched people crawl through the mud, literally, to get there. But they do that because they know that they're worthy enough. And they've had people, whether it's me, their counselor, their family, remind them that they're worthy enough of that. And that forever changed my life. It changes my life every client I have. There's not one that I forget. And there's not one that doesn't touch me in a way that any corporate job, no offense, could never do. Like, I would never go to corporate again. And there's nothing knocking that. But it has filled my soul in a way that you just never would get anywhere else.
Probably as you were doing this, voices and faces were popping into your head as you're talking. I could.
You could probably see my eyes welling up because it's emotional.
Yeah,
it is emotional.
Well, to you, Katie, to Rachel, the work you do, and to Sarah's Friends as a whole, I hate the words hidden jewel, because it shouldn't be a hidden jewel anymore. You're out there in the community, and your services are widely available, and I guess maybe I'm trying to listen to the word man stumble for words here, but jewel is what I keep coming back to of Williams County. So let's just remove hidden and just call Sarah's friends a jewel. We've been blessed to get to know you today a little bit more. I have one more request, and this podcast isn't being filmed, but she's staring back at me right now. Where am I going with
terror.
this? It's an easy thing. I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a guy that found his calling by just being able to communicate a little bit. And so I didn't invent these questions, but I thought I'd come up with, for this podcast, a set of questions that I'm going to call the speed round to get to know our interviewee, our podcast guest, if you will, on 15 Minutes with Andy a little bit better. And Katie's agreed to participate in this.
Reluctantly.
Well,
No.
yeah, a little bit reluctantly.
A little bit.
Because we're not going to go too personal, but a little bit more that you can, that people can get to know you a little bit more just by your answers, okay? And it's only a handful of them, okay?
And I got to be quick with my responses?
No, I
okay.
said speed round, and not necessarily in that, but it's not a dragged out question, I guess, is what makes it a speed question, speed round.
Okay.
What is your favorite word?
Ooh, that's a good word, or a good question. I'm going to say positivity. Okay. And that sounds like such a pageant answer, but I am a very positive person.
And we need more of that in
we do.
This
and
world.
And I think it's always a choice. Every second of every day is a choice of, do you want to lean more negative? Do you want to lean more positive? And I will tell you that if you lean more positive, the world is always better. Your mood is always better. You see things better. So I just think that people need to focus on that a little bit more.
On the flip side, what's your least favorite word?
Can't. I know that's not really, it's 2 words, but can't.
That's a good answer. What sound or noise do you love?
My husband's voice, my kids' voices, laughter.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Chewing. I just can't stand chewing sounds.
So it's good that I didn't have gum. Well, you don't have headsets on. I don't know that you'd heard
And it's more
that.
food chewing. I think food chewing and gum chewing is very different. And and there's actually a brain something with that. I've read that.
Okay.
That there's certain people that just have something going on. That
2
can't
more.
stand it.
Now we know what you started out being, but what profession other than this one, in a perfect world, would you like to try?
Oh, goodness. It's so hard because I've fully embraced my life, but this is what it is. I'm trying to think before this job, what I like I said, I was a wedding planner for a long time. I really loved it at the time, but now I can't imagine going back to it.
So not radio.
Not radio. Anyone who knows me knows that public speaking is like my nemesis, and I always get good compliments, which helps me get through it, and I'm very passionate, so I always take it. I'll never say no because things need to be said, but the process of that for me is hindering. So yeah, public speaking, radio, no. TV, absolutely not.
Okay.
Something I could do behind the scenes, but that I could have a well-rounded, tasks. I like to be busy. I like to have many things I can dabble in because I get bored very easily.
Okay.
Whatever that job looks like.
Last question. Whether it be Sarah's friends or life, and maybe it's going to be one and the same. Maybe it's going to be the same answer. How would you like to be remembered?
Just for being a kind person. I tell that to the kids all the time. If you can be anything, be kind. It doesn't take $1. It doesn't take a cent. Just be kind. I would want that. And to know that I just did my best with whatever that looks like.
Katie Shaffer has been our first guest of 15 Minutes with Andy. Katie, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We appreciate your time today. We appreciate your time, energy, passion, love, and compassion that you put in and pour into your job every day. And as I said, Williams County and Sarah's friends and your survivors, your clients, are very lucky to have you and to have Rachel and to have Sarah's friends available. Any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up?
Just thank you for having me and giving me this platform. I always appreciate the ability to have conversation about it. We don't have enough of them. So if anyone's listening and wants me to have more conversations, I'm always open to that, because the more we talk, the more we know, the more we learn, and the more that we partner in this mission together. And again, call us. 419-636-7272. It spells Sarah if you forget. We are a call away, and it doesn't matter what you're even calling about. We will talk to you. So
there you go. Katie Shaffer, our guest on 15 Minutes with Andy. Thank you so much for your time in listening to podcast number 1.